wouldn't have been able to take on all the endeavors that we were able to without NBT. The Abbey Group is a food service management company servicing New England and New York. We specialize in K-12 schools.
We currently serve over 50,000 meals a day, and we're really big on bringing our local food into the cafeterias.
I began working with the Abbey Group when they were struggling with their former bank to understand their business model. I was able to meet with the owners and their accountant and understand their structure better, which enabled us to meet their needs and help them grow.
During the pandemic, our whole country shut down. Businesses shut down, schools.
We had to completely pivot our business on a dime. It was still imperative that the students were fed.
I think the Abbey Group was able just to pivot and move in the direction they had to because we had NBT Bank there immediately for us.
We had the opportunity to bid and we won Farmers to Families Food Box program that was sponsored by the USDA. We were able to pack boxes and have them delivered directly into people's cars.
And so it was our good relationship we had and understanding with the business that we were able to easily and quickly respond to their needs so that they could take advantage of these contracts and win the contract.
We grew in the pandemic from feeding children in the cafeteria to feeding their whole families in their homes and to helping the whole state of Vermont during, with their food insecurities.
Everyone benefited, the employees, the families, the local companies, the local farmers. This all came together in a wonderful circle of helping each other. And you can only do that when you have a bank like NBT.
It's great when a customer calls us up and tells us about a great win that they've been working on for a long time and we help them achieve that goal.
They're personable, their employees at NBT are amazing. They care, and that's what it's all about when you want to grow your business.
Good morning, everyone. I'm your host, Clay Young, and this morning is truly a unique episode of the 21st Century Business Forum. Now, we are fortunate to have with us a veteran Navy SEAL operator and master training specialist, Scott Daly. Who better to speak with us about building elite teams, right? In addition to operating on active SEAL teams, Scott spent years training junior officers and enlisted SEALs how to perform at elite levels physically, emotionally, and tactically in the world's most demanding environments. He has coached and trained people in over 15 countries on 5 different continents. Now, before joining the Navy after 9/11, he was a highly successful district sales manager with a Fortune 500 company. Through his military and professional experience, Scott brings a unique and passionate perspective. This morning, he's here to talk with us about the value of critical decision-making and a systematic approach to leadership, culture, and behavior for the ultimate purpose of producing exceptional results. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Scott. We cannot wait to dive in on these topics. Well, all right, Scott, I think it makes sense for us to begin with a pretty common definition of what it means to be elite. Most of us probably figure that means that we're better than our competition, but I think you have a very different definition of that. What is it?
So when we look at elite, me specifically, as we go through, how do you define elite for someone? And essentially, as you break it down, it's a person who consistently is clear. They're clear about what they need to do. They're clear about the direction they're taking. They have the right energy. They bring the right energy to the right situation. They're not too high. They're not too low. They're like an energy thermometer. They're not too much, too less. They bring the right energy to each situation, and then they take action. They're people that when they see the opportunity, time to take action, they step up. They take the actions they need. And then they're flexible people. They don't get locked in on a certain mindset. They don't get locked in on a certain skill set. They're flexible to the situation they're in. And they're consistently making sure that their behavior has a positive impact on the people around them because they create relationships. And ultimately, they're consistently getting better. This is an elite person, someone who's about clarity, energy. They bring action. They're constantly flexing to the situation they're in. They have a positive impact on everybody that they influence and talk to, and they're constantly growing. They're getting better every day. That to me defines elite. And the fun thing about that elite is someone once told me, they said, well, this, and this creates dollars. What I've found is if you're behaving clearly, the right energy and the action, the dollars follow, but so do the relationships and the experiences.
Would you agree with this? I've had this conversation with colleagues in business and even people who have done work for me. And it's this, that the money is easy. It's conquering systems that takes the most hard work and focus, learning a system and how to make the system work for you. If you do that, then the money will follow. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thoughts on systems is a great quote I like to say is average leaders use quotes, right? They have posters on the wall. That's how they lead. Good leaders have a plan. I've got an idea of what I want to do. Exceptional elite leaders have a system. And that system they can replicate. They can do it over and over. They can do it consistently, and they can create an experience where I can continually grow my business. I can continually grow my relationships because I go about things with a systematic approach.
I love that. I love that. You had two obstacles pretty early on, an injury and an initial lack of swimming experiences. And I'm sure a lot of people in our audience can relate to that. That would seem to make you an unlikely candidate to be a Navy SEAL. So tell us about those and how you overcame those and what it taught you in the process.
Yeah, a little bit of, I'll start with the first one, the injury. So when I was 16 years old, actually 15 years old, getting about to be 16. I had broken my neck freestyle wrestling. And
Wow.
during that situation, I temporarily paralyzed on one side of the body. And hence that's why I got these nice little dents in my head. Is for a short period of time, I got to be an angel. I had a halo on for a little while, right? So I wore that. That's the only time I can claim it. So I had the halo on, lost all my opportunities to wrestle in college, lost all my potential scholarships. And I had that moment where I think a lot of people have sat when they've had failures, they've had setbacks, and I kind of had my little pity party for a little while. And it was the words of my mother that rang true. They ring true to this day. They rang true then. She looked at me when I was little. She said, "There's nothing you can't do. There's nothing you can't do." And it's funny when that self-talk permeates through your life and you believe it. And there's something about the power of belief that when you believe something, there's nothing you can't do. And everything from being a small kid, wrestled 103 pounds when I was in high school for my freshman year. So I am now the guy that ate the former me. I'm a lot more than that. But in that process, I said, I was like, what am I going to do? So do I sit still or do I get moving? So since they told me I couldn't play those other sports, I ran cross country. I did those types of activities. And so I'd already been accepted to college. And I said, you know what? I won't let this hold me back from what I want. And so I use that setback as an energy thing, something to boost me forward. And I just look at those setbacks. Each thing is building on who you are. You take those setbacks, how you respond to that setback, how you respond to that situation that challenges you is kind of what defines you a little bit. Did I step up or did you will? And so I went through that whole process. I got back on my feet, kind of relearned some walking skills and those things, ran cross country, went to college and said, you know what, I'm not going to let that hold me back from what I want in life. Now, the other piece, though, is the idea that when 9/11 happened, I'd been working for ADP, the payroll company, and in sales for small business. And the 9/11 happened. I said, I haven't had an epiphany that there was more I could do than selling payroll. Not that it was a bad job. It was a great career. I loved it. I loved the organization. But I thought I could do more. And so I went down to the Navy recruiter. My cousin had been a SEAL for many years by this time. And I said, sign me up. I'm ready to go. And they said, all right. Well, they looked at my neck and said, well, there's no way we're going to let this kid with a broken neck join the Navy. And so I had to jump through quite a bit of hoops and it needed the help and support of people who are professionals that could look at that. And I finally got a doctor that signed off and said that, you know what, I don't see any reason you can't go to SEAL training. So I got my waiver. I went in and once I signed on the dotted line, said, yes, I'm in the Navy. And for those of you who've never joined the military, once you've signed on the dotted line, you're theirs. They own you. You are now the Navy's. And so I said, I got 3 months from the day I signed to the day I have to go to boot camp and get ready to go screen. Now, I'd ran my whole life and I said, how hard can swimming be? I mean, I putted around ponds. I've played in pools and lakes and rivers. I said, how hard can this be? And I found out that swimming is not what I expected. Apparently, I'm not good at it. And so I went down to a pool and I said, I'm going to see if I can do that distance, that 500 meters it takes to screen to be a Navy SEAL. I panicked. And by the end of the pool, I stood up at less than 50 meters, panicked because I couldn't swim the whole distance of 50 meters. Now the test is 500.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what do you do when you're faced with the challenges you are not equipped to deal with? And so I went down and I did what everybody does when they can't swim. I went to the library. So I went to the library so I found a book, and it was 12 weeks to SEAL training, 12 weeks to BUDS is what we call SEAL training. And in that book was a section on how to do the side stroke or breaststroke for the exam. And so I took the book, put it in a Ziploc baggie, took it down to the pool, and I started. And through all the years of resilience and growth, I'm the youngest of 5 boys, just to put it that way. Through all the resiliency and stuff, I just started swimming. And by the end of the couple weeks, I could do the length of the pool and back. I was pretty proud of myself. A good swimmer would be laughing at me right now. By the end of the 3 months, I could do it for time. And so when I went to Great Lakes, Illinois to do boot camp, they had the big screening test, big pool, a lot of people in it, 60, 70 some people in this water. Small little 25-meter pool, so it's not really long. It was like rush hour with drowning involved. So you had all these people in the water and they're swimming, and I'm not the most comfortable person in the water at the time. And I swam. And I don't know how many people listening have ever felt like they were the worst person in an activity that you're doing as a group, but I was the worst. And as I'm swimming, I started watching people get out of the water. They were getting out onesies, twosies, and I was getting demoralized. I said, man, these people are done already. How am I so bad at this? And I said, you know what? I'm in it. I'm committed. So I touched the wall at 500 meters, and the instructor at the time leans down and he says, Scott, I got good news for you and I got bad news for you. Good news is you made it. You had 15 seconds to spare. I was like, sweet, I'll take 15 seconds. That works. He said, the bad news is I think you made the worst career decision I've ever seen. He said, today it's 500 meters. You do know that in third phase, it's 5.5 nautical miles, right? I was like, oh, that should definitely be in the brochure next time, because I think that would have been a helpful hint.
Might want to include that.
Yeah. And so he said, go over to the bench and sit with the other guys that are going to go out and do the run, the pull-ups and push-ups, all that stuff. And I looked over and there's only 6 people on the bench. All these people went in the water. I said, oh, did everybody else already head out? And he goes, no, everybody else quit. The water was cold. There was too many people. It was uncomfortable. And so they quit. And the moral of the story, and what I learned through this adversity, is it's not about talent in this world. It's about toughness, and it's about resilience. Are you going to keep going when everybody else quits? When things feel hopeless and they feel like you're just not achieving, do you keep going? Do you keep driving? And I maybe it's that voice of my mother in my head, there's nothing you can't do, kept ringing true to me. I said, just keep going. And when I touched that wall, I got there. I couldn't believe it. And so when I got out of boot camp and got ready to go to SEAL training, I had a little bit of time where I went to some more Navy training. I got a coach. I said, you know what? I'm humble enough to say I'm not good at this. And I had to grab somebody who would put me through the paces and teach me. And an interesting thing that you get back when I went through SEAL training is in indoctrination course, they would put the really slow swimmers on the one side of the pool. And as you went to the lanes, you literally got to Olympic class swimmers on the other side of the pool. Now, fins are a great equalizer, but I think about that. And I said, I moved every day during that training 1 lane further. And the next day I got another lane further. And it was just about learning. It was about resilience. And it was about the willingness to do the hard work to get better. So when talent and hard work meet each other, hard work will outdo talent over time.
I want to go back to something you said in your answer to that question. Is early on, when you're concentrating on what you're doing, you see people getting out of the pool and your thought was, man, how are they finishing so fast? And in all likelihood, they were not finishing, they were quitting, they were giving up. And I think for people in business, because that's our audience for the most part, is sometimes you can look over on the other side at a competitor and think that something's great, but you don't have the full perspective. So it's more important to pay attention to what you have in front of you to do. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's about what we would refer to as front sight focus, right? It's like, I need to stay focused on my business and what I'm doing and being successful. I need to be aware of the competition. I need to be aware of what's going on, but I can't focus on what I think their success looks like. And just from the experience of doing what I've done for the last 7 years, coaching and training and working, you have no idea what's going on inside another business. And that the commitment to your systems, your tools that you're using is critical. One of the problems I see is leaders see that challenge in front of them that, hey, other people are succeeding, and they start to dabble. And when I say dabble, they dabble in leadership. They dabble in systems. And I'm going to do it for a little bit, then not. I'm going to engage in another activity, then not. Or I'm going to lead by the flavor of the month. What book have we read today? Instead of really settling down, say, this is my system. I've done my due diligence. I've picked the right toolbox, and I'm going to go forth and just drive it.
I love that. You've also developed a system or a journey, as you say, to elite. The concept is pretty simple, straightforward. It's an equation of E plus R equals O. Okay, break that down for us.
Yeah, so the system for performance, this is about personal engagement. This is how I navigate the stuff of life. And when you coach and work in an organization, it's developing a language that everybody is operating under. And the E, it refers to the events of life. Everybody experiences a variety of events in their life. We get helpful events, we get hurtful events, we get neutral events. The outcomes that we're getting in our lives, the things that we're achieving, are reflections. They're reflections of the quality of our response. I don't control the events of life. If I could, I'd go buy a lotto ticket today. But I do control how I choose to respond. And that is always my choice. And I think when you teach E plus R equals O, you teach people that it's a mindset first and a skill set second. If you don't think that way, you're probably not going to behave that way. If you're trying to control the world around you, that can be mind-numbing. It can be overwhelming. When you realize that your response is your choice, and then you realize that the quality of the outcomes you're getting are a reflection of the quality of my responses. If I want better things, don't blame the events of life. Choose a better R. I think I've seen some events where people wanted to have a certain type of business, but they're not willing to do the work. And one of my quotes I like to say is, the life you want has a price tag to it. And are you going to pay it? Because you don't get there without it.
I love that. I think it was Marcus Aurelius that said, our life is what our thoughts make it. And it's so spot on that, the way you think and the mindset. And I know, being a Navy SEAL, your mental training is as rigorous as the physical training, because you have to have that mesh of mind and body. And, someone told me a long time ago that discipline will take you places talent doesn't even know exists. and I think that's important. Let's drill down a little bit more here. I like step 1 in the R factor disciplines. Let's press pause and talk about why that's so very important.
Yeah, pressing pause. It's the gateway. It's truly the access to everything your experience. It's clarity. When you pause in life, you take a moment and you observe what's going on. You see the events of life more clearly. You recognize the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and you're able to derive what it's required of you to be successful. And so when you see that, hey, this is what's going on in my business, and it's a struggle. Maybe it's personnel. How many folks on this that are watching this right now are struggling to find people? I could say that's an E for just about every business that I can imagine. And when I see that that's the E, the outcome you want is, obviously, I want to retain the talent I've got. I want to build new talent. And so what's that going to require of me? I'm going to have to find people, and I'm going to have to develop them. One of the best things I ever heard, it was a quote. A gentleman in the 60s had an equipment company. And if I think about that E, right, that specific E, finding the right people, he said, he goes, a dealership, right? It's a dealership for heavy equipment. And he said, the dealer has to be all this list of things. And he gave a great list of attributes that person would have. And at the end, he said, where are you supposed to find these people? He said, you don't, you make them. And I thought that was such a great thing. It's like, don't try to find the imperfect employee. Find someone who fits your culture, who wants to operate the way you do, and train them.
Right.
Equip them. Don't look for the perfect person. Build them. Help develop people. A great person. I just had a call this morning with a phenomenal person that's doing private equity, and he would never call himself that because he wants long-term relationships. But his goal is to go into these family-owned businesses and help grow them and help develop the people inside to make a better life for themselves. Everything from helping them grow their business to stopping smoking.
Right.
And I see people like that. And that's a person who uses that system and says, I see the outcomes I want. I know the E I've got, and I know what the situation requires of me. And when you pause, you do that. And that pause has been used throughout time. I mean, the military uses it. A lot of groups, we call it SILS is one of the jokes, is sit, look, listen, and shut up. And the whole idea is when you get off of a plane, a helicopter, you start a mission, it's like, just take a minute, take in the field, take in what's going on before you move. Don't rush to your own danger or your own demise. It's like, take a moment and think.
Wow. Let's piggyback off that just a little bit. You've said in leadership, you get what you coach, that leaders of high performing organizations coach their people on behaviors that they want to see in their workplace or in their office or in the classroom or on the field or the court. How do we know where to begin that process to get the outcome that you want by teaching it?
Yeah. So in order to do that, first of all, you have to have exceptional clarity on what are the standards? What are my expectations? And in a lot of organizations, they start off with a laundry list, and it might be 27, 30, 40 things long. And they're all good things. They're all things I do want to see in my people. The problem is they're hard to coach. It's hard to coach a million things. So we help people boil things down to a very simple, what we call culture blueprint. And that culture blueprint says, here are the core beliefs of our organization. Here are the associated behaviors that go with those beliefs. And here's the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And it's really what is our cultural standards. So when you say that, it's the belief is the what of culture, what we believe. The behaviors are the how we're going to get there. And the outcomes are the why. Why do we do this? And so when we start off, what I really want people to understand is when you're going to coach this, you have to understand that culture exists within your organization to execute your strategy. That's why it exists. That's why it's there. And the culture of your organization, to coach it, you have to clearly define it. So once you've defined those beliefs, behaviors, and outcomes, now I got to coach them. And so culture has a 3-step process. And then the first step is the paper challenge, right? It's, can I articulate the culture? Can I write it down? Can I make it clear? The second challenge is to communicate it, and that's the head challenge. So paper, then to your head. Can I communicate these cultural standards to everybody in my organization? That typically what I've experienced is where people stop. They stop at that point. I've communicated it. Why aren't people doing it? It's the whole, I sent the email. Why didn't they get it? And so the third step is the one that's most critical. It's do I coach? How do I coach and develop and hold people accountable to the cultural standards? So when we talk about coaching, it's continuous. It's not a one-time thing, and you get what you measure. So if I measure safety, I'll have safety results. If I measure sales, I'll get sales results. If I get productivity results, that's what I have to be measuring. What I find is the challenge is a company that wants safety results is measuring performance and not safety. And so they're not coaching it. Therefore, you get what you coach. Now, I've worked with some really large organizations that made it a priority to coach safety. And safety, you get what you coach, right? They've lowered their what they call DART rate, which is like lost time and equipment. And they lowered it from above industry standard to beating the industry standard significantly. And it's all about how you coach and drive safety. So when I say you get what you coach, be clear about what you're trying to lead, and you got to coach it on a daily basis. It's not something you do once. It's a continuous journey of coaching.
Have you had difficulty getting leaders to adjust their approach to apply what you've just explained to us?
Yeah, there are challenges because it's foreign for a lot of folks. It's foreign to coach behavior. And what I coach the coaches on is really that it's not an out-of-body experience. What I'm asking you to do is incorporate the language of our culture into every conversation. I give a great example on our Monday morning meetings here at Focus 3. I will have everybody on the call, and I do the work the week prior. I look at the week prior. What did people do? Where were our people achieving and living up to our standards? And I talk about it. I say, hey, the last week, such and such did a phenomenal job. And we say power the team and say support the customer, support someone who does. And last week they said, I'll do that paperwork and all that background work. Man, I just want to recognize that person for doing that. And then move on. That was a culture conversation. It was a culture moment. And if I consistently recognize the behaviors I want to see, I will get them. I had worked with a hockey coach, and she was amazing, right? Amazing hockey coach here at Ohio State. And one day she came off the ice. It's one of my favorite stories. And her team was down against her former alma mater of all places. And as she came off the ice, she was hot because her team was not performing the way she wanted to. And I just looked at her and I said, just take a second, give the team what they need, not what you want. Coach them on the behaviors you want to see, not the things you're not liking. And she kind of got a little moment. Then she went in there, they came out and won. In the second 2 periods, they came out and won. And I really think that's what great coaches do, is coach on the behavior I want to see, not what's going wrong. I can't coach on what's going wrong. I'm going to coach on what I want you to do.
Wow. What are some of the companies or organizations that we might know or have heard of that you would consider to be elite, and what makes them elite?
I think, well, first of all, what makes an organization elite is that they execute on their vision, they execute on their plan, and the brand, what I say is the branding that they put out is different than the brand experience, is the same as the brand experience. So for example, if you go to Ritz-Carlton, the brand is, if you talk to someone at Ritz-Carlton, and I guarantee if you go to any Ritz-Carlton and ask someone to pull their culture card out, they will pull it out of their pocket, because they have a culture discussion every day. And their motto is ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And they live it and you experience it. Southwest Airlines, great culture. The people, if you don't meet their cultural standard, you won't even get hired. Chick-fil-A, if you go to Chick-fil-A in Atlanta and if you say thank you in a Chick-fil-A in Atlanta, what will they tell you? My pleasure.
Oh no, listen, I'm 3 for 3 on these and you're spot on for every one of them.
Yeah. But if you go to Chick-fil-A in Columbus, Ohio, guess what they'll say? My pleasure. And that's not culture by accident. That's culture by design. And people are coaching it. And they're great examples where if I coach it, I'll get those behaviors. Where you run into other organizations where they don't coach the behavior and you get a random experience. And you've probably experienced companies where you go one place, you had a great experience. You go to another and it's not the same. And what you see is it's a failure to coach that effort. And so I think of some of the organizations we worked with, of PE firms and groups that are trying to grow lots of different organizations. I said, well, you have to create a behavioral standard that you want to see to grow that business. Some other groups I think are exceptional and maybe not as well known would be the SEAL Legacy Foundation. SEAL Legacy Foundation is dedicated to providing support and financial for the families and service members who are fallen. And when I think of a great charitable group like that really delivers on what they promise, the platinum level charity, they do amazing work. And the stories that you hear of how they've supported, they match what they promise. And I think that's what makes a great organization. Your brand promise and your brand experience are the same.
It's so interesting. You talk about culture in such a well-stated way, but I've from time to time found that there are companies that don't have a culture. I mean, they're organized, they're well-intended, but there's no culture. There's nothing you will leave there. Like you talked about Chick-fil-A, the culture the Cathy family has created all across the country. How does someone know if they have a culture in their business?
So I will tell you, there's always a culture in your business. It does exist. The question is, did you design it? And I say culture by design or culture by default. And many organizations get culture by default, and they just get the strongest personality. They get whatever the current trend is. And so their culture is not well defined. It happens a lot. And these companies that say, man, I'm not sure what our culture is. I'm not sure what it looks like, what the experience is. That's when we encourage them to sit down and really look at their business and what we call a 5-driver assessment. Say, what is your strategic plan? What are your goals? What are you trying to do strategically? Okay, well, strategy tells you how we're going to do our business. And then we take a look at them and say, well, your processes operationalize your strategy. How are your processes working right now to help that happen? What's your structure look like? Do you have the right people in the right seats? Are we able to hire and get the right people? And ultimately, does our culture execute on that plan? And when you look at that, say, hey, how do those 5 things come together to make my business work? I can say, is my culture doing what it's supposed to be doing? Is it actually functional? Or is it just this analogous thing? And when you don't have culture by design, you can find that your performance will rise and fall based on that. We say that the performance of an organization rises and falls on human behavior. It's the
Yeah.
one thing that affects everything.
Wow. Other than not having a clear culture, what are the biggest killers of elite performance that those of us in the audience and others that you have dealt with should be on the lookout for and be cautious about? And how do you eliminate them?
So one of the biggest culture killers is BCD, and not CBD, not to be confused, but BCD: blame, complain, and defend. And all too often, I mean, some of us do it a little bit, some of us do it a lot. But if you're one of those people who does a little, don't worry, someone's making up ground for you. And the reality is, BCD is we blame others for why we're not successful. We complain about our situation endlessly, and we defend our personal behavior no matter what. And what we find is BCD's never solved a problem. It's never achieved a goal. It's never made a relationship better. And the opposite of BCD is not to be quiet. The opposite of BCD is to solve problems. It's E plus R equals O. I tell leaders, your job is to outlast the selfish, the cynical, the satisfied, because they're there. And cynicism and negativity, when it breeds, there are whole organizations, the way they communicate with each other is through negativity. It's what we don't like, what's not working. And what I tell you is, like, that's unproductive behavior. I do a calculation. And if you're sitting here watching today, I want you to think about this calculation. And then when I have a large audience, I'll say, take the number of employees you have. How many hours a week do you think the average person spends blaming, complaining, and defending? And I mean, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there throughout their workday. How many hours a day do you think they spend? And the people do the number. And typically I'll bring them back down to reality and say, maybe it's an hour. But if you've got the number of employees, let's say you're a 100 employee company, that's 100 hours a day. Goes out the window to blaming, complaining, and defending. And it's the cumulative effect of behavior over time that you're really grabbing. And I said, that's 100 hours a day. If you average out, say you're paying $40 an hour, you just spent $4,000 today to pay your people to complain about the job they have, blame their colleagues, and defend bad decisions.
Right.
At $4,000 a day, the average person works 240 days a year, right? So if I say 240 days a year times 4,000, your 100-person company just spent $960,000 a year paying its people to complain about behavior.
Wow.
And so why is it so important? I can either choose resolution, problem solving, right? Or resilience. Are there things in your business, in your personal life, that aren't up to you? They're just a situation you have to deal with. Well, sometimes you have to choose either solve problems or navigate it with a good attitude. It's not always fun, right? But it's what's required. But I think the real challenge of removing that negativity and that thing that can be a detriment to your culture is, how do leaders deal with it? And leaders have three obligations, right? They have to love their people. I think Tom Brady said it best. Not that everybody here's a Tom Brady fan, but Tom Brady said it best in another podcast where he was on and said, they said, why are you so good wherever you go? He said, I love what I do and I love who I do it with. And I think about that. That is that brotherly, sisterly love that I truly care for the people I work with. So as a leader, your obligation when BCD is running rampant is love them, listen to them, and then redirect them to resolution or resilience. Help them solve problems, help them navigate through adversity. And that's where we truly start to make change and get some of that negativity and cynicism out of our workforce. And so that's one of the things I think is a big negative that holds a lot of organizations back. And the other one is that dabbling concept I talked about. It is leadership dabbling. People lead for a little bit. They really get in the weeds. They start to lead and they get really engaged. Then they go MIA and we don't see them for a while. And they dabble. They lead a little bit. They don't lead for a while. And so people's experience of leadership is inconsistent. And that means that leaders aren't building trust and they're not achieving results. So that's one of the other challenges.
Given some of the workforce challenges, and you referenced that earlier, and it's happening all across the country, what advice would you give people who are recognizing elite abilities or trying to recognize elite abilities in others, and for recruiting and retaining elite talent?
Yeah. One of the things there is that, first of all, that first step I talked about clarifying your culture. Are you clear about what the standards are in your organization? And so then what I say is that you have to interview and ask questions around those standards. Does somebody operate the way you do? Does somebody, an old SEAL joke is, this job's not for everybody. In the unlikely event you make it through SEAL training, it will be way harder in the real world than it is right now. I remember that phrase because they said it to me about every day, 3, 4, 5 times a day. Now, the same thing happens in your business. It's not wrong to say, hey, you're just not a good cultural fit with our organization. And one of the things I'll draw out for people in a session, and we talk about that aligning people as we go to look at hire and bring people in, we want people to be able to be themselves, but align with us. I'll say it one more time because I think that's really important. You can be you and align with us. A culture of diversity allows for you to be yourself in our organization and still align around some core principles. And those core principles are non-negotiables, and those non-negotiables will never negate who you are. And I think that's the key, is that if I've got clear standards, as I go to hire, I want to make sure the people I interview meet that cultural standard. I can teach you the job skills. I can equip you with the technical capacity. One of the other phrases I would tell people is, we hire for job skills. What do we fire for? Behavior related issues.
Right.
But if I get someone who's behaviorally aligned, I can teach the job skills. So I think that's key. Don't spend your days looking for the perfect technician. I would look for the person that fits the culture and can learn. Now, there are some technical capacities, I'm not trying to ignore those, that are required for some jobs, but somebody who aligns with you, they're going to have more retention. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to be more invested.
Wow. Well, one final question, and this is one of my favorites in the group. No bubbles, no troubles. What does that even mean in the process of being elite?
Okay, so no bubbles, no troubles. It's about doing the hard work. So let me take you back to the origin of it, and then we'll put it into context.
Okay.
So the origin of no bubbles, no troubles is when you dive as a SEAL, we do these rebreathers. It's a dragger. It's the dive rig that it's all self-contained. So you exhale, it scrubs the CO2 out of your air and gives you that air back. So it's a rebreathing system. Problem with it is, if you get water in it, the water goes into this lime that cleans the air, and water and lime makes poison. So one of the things you have to do before you even put your dive rig out, these big water tanks, you put your rig down in the water. And if there's bubbles, you got a leak somewhere. And so you have to go back through and find the leak, which can be its own problem. But bigger picture of this whole no bubbles, no troubles is, if you do quality work and preparation, if you do all the pre-work, all the things required to be successful, you're ready to go operate. And I think there's something to be said for, I've done all the work, I've done all the prep, I've done all the training, I've done all the things I need to do. I'm ready to go operate, and I'm not worried anymore. I've done all the hard work. You think of an athlete, I've done the practices, I've done the reps. If you're a surgeon, I think a friend of mine is a neurosurgeon, said, he wrote it in his book. He said 50,000 hours. He goes, I've done about 50,000 hours over my many years of surgery in different medical work. He said, and now I finally feel like a pro. And I love that, but sometimes it's that prep work. It's the reps. Do the reps. I don't care what your business is. Whether you're a salesperson, do the sales reps. People don't like to do them, but do them. That's how we build skill. No bubbles, no troubles. When you walk in, I am confident that I am prepared to do this. And what it does is it builds a strong ego. And there's two types of ego. There's big ego that is inflated and it's full of itself, and it wants command and control, and it wants its image maintained. And then there's strong ego. Strong ego is confidence. I've done the work. I've prepared. I'm ready to go. One of the people that I got an opportunity to coach, she's amazing. And she's one of my definitions of a leader who is so confident. And it's not arrogance. It doesn't come off as arrogance. It's not rude. But her performance, I just look at that and said, you can tell she's prepared for the conversation. She's prepared for what's ahead, and she's done her homework. No bubbles, no troubles.
I love that. It makes complete sense too, but it's just so curious about that. Well, Scott, it's been such an enlightening conversation. Is there any thought that you would like to leave with the audience, something that we did not cover today?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the power of being elite, why would I want to go on this journey? And why would I not? A lot of people will settle for average in their life. And they settle for average because it's easy, it's socially convenient, it's less stress, and we settle for that average. And the reason people don't become elite is almost the same as the opposite reasons. It's socially stressful, it's higher pressure, there's great rewards, but I would tell you, you've got to make the decision that I'm going to be disciplined, that I'm going to go do the work. I don't want to be average. I want to be something else. I want to grow. I want to be the best version of me. One of the phrases in the SEAL compound, and it's right over the pull-up bars. I know they're rebuilding the compound now, but the phrase that resonated with me and I looked at every day was be someone special. And it was just, it reminded me, hey, don't be average, be someone special. You don't need coaching to be average. You just need to wake up tomorrow, put your feet on the floor, get out of bed. You made it. You reached average. Being elite doesn't need coaching, but I tell people that if you want to do something special, you just have to make a commitment that I'm going to go do it, and just don't quit. It's the same advice I give every parent, every person, young person who asks me, man, I want to be a Navy SEAL. What do I got to do? I was like, I'm going to give you advice you're not going to like, because it's super simple. Don't quit. That's the answer. Don't quit. I said, you're going to be challenged. There's going to be difficulties. There's going to be struggles. Just don't quit. Your success rate in life, in the SEAL teams, in business, skyrockets if you just keep going.
Well, Scott, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. It's truly been enlightening and inspiring. We appreciate your insights into elite leadership and building elite culture in our organizations. I'd also like to thank our guests for joining me this morning and thank our sponsors for making this episode possible. We'll see you next month right here on the 21st Century Business Forum.